This meeting will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please read the chamber emergency evacuation announcement.
Upon activation of the emergency alarm signal, all persons should immediately exit the building. Please use the exits to the left or right front of the council chamber or the east or west stairwells outside the rear doors of the chamber. Do not use elevators or escalators. After exiting the building, proceed to the assembly area located in the parking lot bordered by Clay, 8th, and 9th Streets. Citizens and employees should assist visually and hearing impaired visitors with exiting the building. And Madam President, for the record, all members of council are in attendance with the exception of Councilman Samuels.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, we will now have the presentation of the proposed FY2017 biennial budget by our Mayor, Dwight C. Jones.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Vice President, and to all the members of council, and to my fellow Richmonders, good afternoon. Since we met in this room a year ago, our city has grown more exciting and more vibrant. Hardly a day goes by without Richmond joining another list of cool places to visit, eat, and live. People around the world are looking at us as never before. Look all over town, and you'll see the Richmond resurgence continues. Stone Brewing is opened in Fulton, bringing new jobs to a neighborhood that had been left behind. Triple Crossing Brewing will soon follow a half-mile away, all because Stone is there. And so our investment is paying off in a big way. In South Richmond, we've launched our 40-year partnership to integrate the Richmond Marine Terminal into the port's regional global network. And this year, our port received a $17 million upgrade paid for by somebody else, including a 350-ton harbor crane. And as a result, we've grown from 6 international shipping carriers to 10 in just a few months. We're at a whole new level. And right outside our front door, Bus Rapid Transit, we continue this momentum, then BRT can be our first step toward regional transit, which we so much need in this community. And make no mistake, over the past 7 years together, we have worked our way through some difficult times. We've attracted new businesses, we've improved the city's bond rating, we've built new schools and we've built new facilities, we've ignited riverfront development, we've turned our population numbers around, we've begun to target poverty, we've created an environment for new jobs, we've built new infrastructure, we've helped expand businesses, we've heightened our arts and cultural scene and tourism draw. To be absolutely honest, what we've done is we've put the city on a global stage. And in short, we have improved the quality of life in Richmond. Richmond's future has never looked brighter, but I need to tell you that we have some serious decisions that we have to make as a community, and we need to make them together. And that's what I want to talk to you about today as we make these budget proposals. Before we discuss proposals for the new fiscal year that starts in 4 months, it's important to understand where we are in the current fiscal year. In short, we have a deficit. It results directly from removing roughly $9 million from the operating budget last year. It's important to understand that that budget that I introduced last year included funding to cover all city expenses using the same format and fiscal mechanisms that have been used in every budget that I've proposed and you have approved over the last 7 years. The last year's deliberations revealed the need for greater clarity in our budgeting system, including the need to specifically delineate certain key items in the budget, such as leaf collection and snow removal. For this reason, I've directed our staff to reflect all funding details of these costs and our contractual commitments in this budget to ensure a more detailed view of city service requirements to the public. While previous budgets covered the cost of these services, it was done through operating savings that would typically be reallocated among agencies in the third quarter of each year. This is how the city has covered numerous costs that can vary from public safety officers and costs related to weather events. The practice had become routine, and for each of the past 7 years, Council has approved these third quarter reallocation papers unanimously. This changed in last year's deliberations when $9 million was removed from the budget and transferred to RPS. Now, while that action was good for the schools, it has created real operational problems for other agencies, and we're left with a projected deficit in the current fiscal year. And for these reasons, I'm proposing that we take 4 immediate actions to reduce expenses across city government in the current year. Number 1, we're instituting an immediate hiring freeze, restricting all non-critical positions through the end of the year. I've asked the administration to review all vacated positions moving forward, to reinstate only critical vacancies in support of public safety and our financial service requirements, so as to sustain the core service needs of our residents. Number 2, we're limiting discretionary funding. These changes will be felt by all city agencies and service partners. It will require uncomfortable but necessary adjustments to prioritize the service and funding commitments of our city. Number 3, we're going to enhance our revenue collections. And number 4, I'm proposing a one-time transfer of $3 million from our excess fund balance to cover the cost of last month's extreme weather. And I need to be clear about 2 things. One is that one-time transfer to cover the cost of a rare storm that we had that brought blizzard-like conditions is necessary. And also that I'm only moving excess money above the fund balance limits that we have all agreed upon. This money exists only because we projected to end 2015 with a budget surplus, and only because we have worked within our means. By taking these actions, we hope to be able to end 16 with a balanced budget and avoid a deficit. But fiscal year 2017 will bring a similar problem. These interim tactics will not be a long-term solution. A growing and thriving city can't freeze hiring for a year. We can't restrict necessary spending or assume that a new surplus will emerge. And so for the new fiscal year beginning July 1, I'm proposing to hold Richmond Public Schools harmless and once again allocate the $11.2 million that you set aside last year for RPS. In addition, I'm proposing to allow RPS to keep the $1.5 million that they have not spent from the money approved last year. Over this 2-year budget, there's more than $22 million in new operating funds for RPS. In addition, we've turned over another $18 million in capital funding to begin planning and design of school buildings, together with more than $17 million in annual debt payments on the 4 new schools we've built over the past 7 years. Public education remains the largest single investment that we make in the city of Richmond. In fact, the schools are the only agency that will not see its budget cut in 2017. In order to hold our schools harmless from cuts, I need to propose 3 actions. Number 1, I am proposing a 12% discretionary budget cut across the board, excluding debt payments and risk management. This is on top of the 3% reductions approved last year, and it will force all agencies to embrace a new commitment to efficiency. Number 2, our community partners will have to help in this regard. And so I'm proposing a 25% reduction to all discretionary, non-departmental funding, excluding key strategic partners. Number 3, our residents will have to help by paying higher fees for some services. These will include changing parking rates by 50 cents, the refuge fee from $17.50 to $20, the police department's false alarm fee, the sheriff's $1-a-day fee will turn into a $2-a-day fee, and new fees on vehicle licenses and street vendors. All of these changes are necessary to maintain the policy decision made last year to redirect the $9 million from operations to RPS. I am proposing to maintain this level of funding for RPS and to hold our schools harmless from cuts that other agencies are receiving, but this decision does come with a cost. Like all of us, I have heard loud and clear the calls for dramatic levels of new funding for RPS, and I agree. that our schools need additional investment, even above what has been allocated over the last 2 years. We all know that the main state education funding formula disadvantages the capital city. In addition, during the recession, the state revised school funding downward to give even less money to localities. In short, the state stopped funding thousands of support positions and student services, leaving cities and counties to pick up the tab. So as mayor, I've had to write budgets within the limited local revenue that we have. I've had to do it with declining state dollars and rising needs. Our dollars are limited, and any new dollars have got to come from someplace. My approach is to live within our means as much as possible, and I propose to fund RPS and all other services using existing resources and by raising some new ones. But when the call comes for even more and new investments, there are limited ways to generate it. And so in preparing this budget, I chose not to raise the meals tax, I chose not to furlough employees, and I chose not to lay anybody off. To generate the necessary money to fund the operating request of schools, it could mean 26 days of furlough or laying off 400 employees. I chose not to take these actions because they're bad ideas. It's also a bad idea to continue down the path that was taken last year, the path of cutting operations without regard for the consequences. Any additional cuts beyond the carefully targeted measures that I'm proposing today will inevitably cripple the city. But against that backdrop, I want to let everybody know that I recognize the need for the upgrade of our school facilities. The school board has rightly brought to the community's attention the fact that there has been deferred maintenance not only of school buildings, but of many of our buildings in the city. The problem is across all city departments, but it's acute in our public schools. Now, this problem did not come up overnight, and it will not be solved overnight. And so I'm proposing a new multi-year investment funding plan to begin implementing a long-term renovation and construction plan for public school buildings. And this will also be able to find some money to infuse dollars into operating funds as well. Like all capital projects, it's important to remember that this investment plan will be funded by borrowed money. It's also important to remember that this debt has to be paid back by annual payments that will come from the general fund. It's like your credit card. If you borrow $5,000, you still have to pay it back a little each month. And in the same way, it's easier to pay it back if you have money specifically set aside for the bill. And so I'm saying today that I want to introduce legislation to set aside 20% of all incremental new real estate tax revenue to fund school construction and renovation. This means that new homes and commercial buildings, when they come online in Richmond, schools will be guaranteed to receive a major portion of the new money. As the city grows, school funding will grow as well. Here's an example of what I mean. We have recently approved BRT, and those plans include assumptions of significantly rising real estate valuations along the Broad Street corridor. When major projects like this come online, revenue to the city obviously increases. That is further enhanced by the normal course of residential and commercial growth. The growth of residential and commercial expansion is the key to significant new funding for RPS. In fact, under the legislation that I'm proposing today, it could mean up to $7 million in new revenue for schools, which could then be used to back approximately $100 million in new borrowing, along with the anticipated opening of the city's bonding capacity. This could fully fund the construction plan proposed by schools over time. Basically, this proposal means that when our city expands, so does funding for the capital needs of the school system. Now, to move this forward, I will immediately establish an implementation team to lay out these plans and make sure that they are fiscally responsible and sustainable. The working group will include leaders from City Council, the school board, our financial advisors, and our stakeholders. I want them to report back to us by September, and their charge will be to examine our debt capacity, to determine our debt policy needs, if our debt policy needs any changes, to assess how we project revenues for new projects, and to determine whether any additional City Council action is required to move forward on meeting the facilities needs of the schools. The new school investment funding will allow the city to move forward on school construction that RPS is currently planning, funded by the $18 million in planning money that we set aside last year, and that's a good thing for our community. And so before I conclude, I want to step back and talk about where we are as a city on some larger decisions that we need to make as a community. We all know that Richmond has changed drastically over the last 10 years. Our population has increased since 2005, and we celebrate the city's return to growth. But at the same time, the number of city personnel to serve that growing population has declined by 9%, and revenues are roughly the same as they were a decade ago. This is partly because the city also decided to lower the real estate tax rate twice before the recession. That action, together with the economic downturn, basically has us operating in 2016 at 2008 financial levels. These are the facts. And when I say that we have done more with less, I really need for you to know that we mean what we say. Overall, this has led to the funding problem that we're now experiencing across all city departments. And at the same time, we also know that school funding is further affected by state policies that hurt Virginia's capital city. In Virginia, public schools are funded with a mix of money that comes from the state and local money. The state sets the rules, and the rules hurt Richmond primarily because they fail to take into account our high poverty rate. Then during the recession, the state changed the school funding formula to give even less to localities. In short, the state stopped funding thousands of support positions, student services, leaving cities to pick up the tab. In the meantime, we still have a problem in Richmond, and residents are demanding action, but the costs are high, and our current budget is not sized to meet the needs of our city. The only way to bring this forward is to get new revenue, and that's likely in the form of a tax increase. But make no mistake about it, this is a serious decision that should not be made by me alone, and it should not be made in council chambers alone. The public needs to be involved in a major decision like this. Therefore, I want to propose that we explore together throughout this budget process the idea of an advisory referendum on the November ballot to determine whether the public wishes to raise its taxes and by how much. And while we have to consider what public schools need, because that's critical, we also have to remember that there are many other priorities. And so I believe that we should also include questions on the ballot about critical infrastructure needs. That way, we'll know exactly what residents expect, and residents will be clear about the impact on other services as a result of spending decisions that are made. If it is the will of the people to significantly raise taxes, they will have an opportunity to indicate that. If the people, in turn, prefer to drastically cut service, give up leaf collection, or to cut City Hall hours, or to reduce trash pickup, then we'll know that too. With this approach, we'll determine exactly what course Richmonders would like for us to take, and we'll be able to address their future needs. This way, future mayors and city councils will have a clear consensus from the community about how to expand services or to restrict them. This is a fundamental question for our city. A city in decline would make one decision, but I'm hoping that a growing, thriving, resurgent city will make a different decision. And as leaders, it's our job to position the city to provide our greatest impact for the citizens that we serve. And it is my hope today that we will make these decisions together. We need to hear every voice, and we need not to back down from making hard choices. As for me and my administration, together with all of you, I'm proud of what we have been able to accomplish together. Our work has been good. We've set a clear course for an even brighter future. But we all know that there is much, much work that lies ahead, including these difficult budget deliberations. And the choices we make will shape the future of our city. And I'll be working to keep our city on the right course for a bright future, and I know that we're going to be doing the same thing together, that you'll be right there with me. And so let's get that job done. Thank you so much. Madam Chairman, I'd just like to thank members of my staff who have done such a tremendous job working sometimes all day and half the night. They have really, really done a tremendous job. And would you help me recognize the people who put this thing together? Selena Cuffey-Glenn and her team, Lenora Reed and her team, Dr. Jay Brown and his team, the members of my staff, Grant Neely, Tammy and Cheryl Ivy Green, Tammy Hawley and Cheryl Ivy Green. Would you just stand up and let us thank you for doing a great job?
Madam President, I have a couple questions for Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, you know that the schools have been in limbo, I guess, ever since you've been mayor. You know, they have been down here over and over and over asking for more money and telling us what they needed and why they needed it, and their cries have been ignored. I know that you're saying today that we're going to give more money to the schools and things like that, but you have to realize, plus you also said that we're going to not hire anybody else, and you didn't lay anybody off, you didn't fire anybody, but you have to realize there has been 594 vacancies. 594. That is over a total of $23 to $24 million. Where is that money? And every time Public Works has come before us, I have asked them over and over, do you have enough employees? Are you staffed enough? Yes. They have told me that they didn't need any. One was Emmanuel, the other one was James Jackson, and here we are. If you look at this sheet right here, most of it is Public Works. I mean, it's disgrace. It's a disgrace. And if you don't hire anybody else to fill these vacancies, as I said, trash pickup, street maintenance, all of that, and then you're going to throw it on us, the council members, to help you to see if the citizens want another tax increase or let them vote on it in November. I'm out here in my district every single day, and believe me, this morning, since they've heard this when you made your last speech that you would propose, they're telling me, hell no. They do not want taxes to be, our taxes are high enough. Our utility taxes are high enough. Meal tax, real estate tax, admission tax, other thing. And what are they getting for it? What are the taxpayers getting for it?
Do you want me to answer
And
a question?
It's just not in the 8th district, not just in the 8th district, it is all over the city. And I don't know why my colleagues don't speak up. I've been driving over there in every part, south side, and it's just as bad as what it is in the 8th district. Go ahead.
Well, what's the question?
I'm asking, well, can you cut or not hire anybody else when we got so many vacancies? Let's take just Public Works. Then
Are you aware,
push
Ms.
all the
Trammell?
money
Are you
out.
aware, Ms. Trammell?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you aware that City Council cut the unfunded positions?
Are you aware
last
that
year?
I've been asking every year I ask Public Works, do they have enough employees? And they say yes. They're not understaffed. Now we're finding out.
All right, I'm not going to argue with you.
That's what they
Just-
say. Thank you, Parker.
Just
You're
read-
the mayor.
read the
You're
budget.
the mayor. And also, you need to realize is that niceties over necessities, what should have been asked to the taxpayers in the city of Richmond?
Okay.
One with the bike race and all that. All this money that was coming in, all the money, everything else. And I know that I fought so hard to get the Port of Richmond here without your support at first. Yeah, I was meeting back in the day when Governor Bob McDonnell was the governor.
Ms. Trammell.
We were talking, I'm talking to him.
I understand, but we're
I'm
not
talking to
going
him.
back in the day.
I'm
What we're
asking
go-
so
I
he can
hear
know,
you.
so
I
that he can know,
understand.
because people are going to say that we're going to raise
I
their
understand.
taxes.
I understand exactly
Okay.
what you're saying, but
All
we're
right,
not
let him
going
answer
to
the
have a back
question.
and a forth.
Answer the question, Mr. Mayor.
First of all, we have raised Richmond Public Schools every year Under my administration, we've built 4 new schools. I have laid out here today a path forward, so we can rehearse history and talk about what hasn't been done, or we can talk about how we're going to go forward and provide some solutions working together. And I hope that's what we'll do. City Council cut the vacancy fund, and we're trying to figure out how to adjust to that. We're not casting blame. We're just trying to figure out how to go forward. And it would be really great if we could all go forward together.
Mayor, you didn't answer my question. What happened to the $23 to $24 million without those vacancies being filled? Where is that money? With those vacancies that have not been filled. I have the sheets right here. I've been going over this. First time ever, I've been really studying this thing because you're not completely blaming us or blaming me so that they can come out and say, we raised taxes, but yet there's $23 to $24 million that you not explained, and how come those vacancies were not filled, not last year and the other previous years, with Public Works?
Well, Ms. Trammell, in your deliberations, you'll get all those answers.
Or what?
In your deliberations, you will get all of those answers.
Well, I want the public to know, too. So maybe you can come back here and let the public know what these answers.
Madam Clerk, we're moving on to read the introductory papers.
Madam President, I believe that someone needs to suspend Rule 6 of Council's Rules of Procedures.
I would make that motion. I'd specifically move to suspend Rule 6 of the Council's Rules of Procedure for all budget-related ordinances introduced today, so that those ordinances are not referred to or reviewed by a standing committee, but are instead reviewed during the budget review process developed by the Council and the Council Chief of Staff, and heard during the budget public hearing currently scheduled for Monday, April 11th, 2016 at 6 p.m.
Thank you so much, Mr. Samuels. Madam Clerk, if you could read the introductory papers at this time.
Don't we have to vote on that motion?
Yes, let's vote on the motion, I'm sorry.
I second that motion, Madam President.
Madam Clerk.
Council is voting on the motion as stated by Councilman Samuels. Mr. Beliles?
Aye.
Ms. Graziano?
Aye.
Mr. Samuels?
Aye.
Mr. Agelesto?
Aye.
Ms. Robertson?
Aye.
Ms. Trammell?
Aye.
Ms. Newbill?
Aye.
Vice President Hilbert?
Aye.
President Mosby?
Aye.
The motion is passed.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
The introduction papers for this afternoon are as follows, all with the council public hearing date of Monday, April 11th at 6 p.m. An ordinance to amend Appendix A of the City Code for the purpose of increasing on-street parking meter charges. An ordinance to adopt the Department of Public Works Parking Enterprise Fund budget for fiscal year 2016 to 2017. An ordinance to adopt the special fund budgets for FY2017. An ordinance to repeal Chapter 10, Article 3 of the City Code and to amend Chapter 10 of the City Code for the purpose of implementing a procedure to issue alarm permits and assess charges for excessive false alarms, and to amend Appendix A of the City Code by repealing the fees set forth therein and adding new fees. An ordinance to amend City Code Section 12-120 concerning rates and discounts for parking facilities operated by the city to impose a penalty for late payments. An ordinance to amend fees set forth in Appendix A of the City Code concerning fees for solid waste to establish revised charges for such services. An ordinance to adopt the debt service fund budget for FY 2017. An ordinance to adopt the general fund budget for FY 2017. An ordinance to amend Appendix A of the City Code concerning license fees to increase the license fee for certain licenses from $30 to $50. An ordinance to amend City Code Section 26-977 concerning vehicle license fees for motor vehicles and for motorcycles for the purpose of providing that such license fees shall be equal to the fee imposed by Virginia Code Section 46.2-694. An ordinance to amend City Code for the purpose of increasing the licensing tax for peddlers of crabs and for hawkers and hucksters from $225 to $300. An ordinance to appropriate and to provide funds for financing the school budget for FY 2017. An ordinance to accept a program of proposed capital improvement projects for FY 2017 and for the 4 fiscal years thereafter to adopt a capital budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2016. An ordinance to adopt the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Community Facilities Richmond Cemeteries budget for FY 2017. An ordinance to adopt the Internal Service Fund budgets for FY 2017. An ordinance to authorize the issuance of general obligation equipment notes of the city in the maximum principal amount of $5.5 million to finance the cost of equipment. An ordinance to authorize the issuance of public utility revenue bonds of the city in the maximum principal amount of $110,676,000 to finance the cost of capital improvement projects. An ordinance to authorize the issuance of general obligation public improvement bonds of the city in the maximum principal amount of $62,500,000 to finance the cost of school projects and general capital improvement projects. An ordinance to cancel all authorized but unissued notes authorized by the city in FY 2015 and to authorize the issuance of general obligation equipment notes in the maximum principal amount of $5 million to finance the cost of equipment. An ordinance to amend the ordinance concerning salary supplements for the Commonwealth Attorney's Office to provide the Commonwealth Attorney with a salary supplement of $46,768 and a contribution to the Virginia Retirement System of $9,713, and to provide the office with $783,169 for salary supplements and $185,229 for a contribution to the Virginia Retirement System for members of the office for FY 2017. An ordinance to amend the ordinance concerning salary supplements for the Sheriff's Office to provide the Sheriff with a salary supplement of $23,069 and the Sheriff's Office with $2,897,868 for salary supplements for the members of the office for FY 2017. An ordinance to amend Appendix A of the City Code to increase the charges for recycling by the city. An ordinance to amend Sections 3 and 25 of Article 3 of Ordinance Number 93-117-159 to suspend the educational incentive program for certain police and fire officers for FY 2017. An ordinance to amend Appendix A of the City Code for concerning fees for residential, commercial, industrial, state and federal, and municipal wastewater services to establish revised charges for such services. An ordinance to amend Appendix A of the City Code concerning fees for residential, commercial, industrial, municipal, and state and federal water services to establish revised charges for such services. An ordinance to amend Appendix A of the City Code concerning fees for residential gas peaking service, general gas, transportation service, municipal gas service, large volume gas sales service, and large volume high load factor gas sales services to establish revised charges for such services. An ordinance to adopt the water utility budget for FY 2017. An ordinance to adopt the Department of Public Utilities Stores Internal Service Fund budgets for FY 2017. An ordinance to adopt the gas utility budget for FY 2017. An ordinance to adopt the wastewater utility budget for FY 2017. An ordinance to adopt the stormwater utility budget for FY 2017. And an ordinance to adopt the electric utility budget for FY 2017. Madam President, that concludes this afternoon's reading of the introduction papers.
Thanks so much, Madam Clerk. Just before adjournment, colleagues, as you all know, the meeting with RPS Board will be held on Monday, March 14th from 9 to 12:30 at the Police Academy. The mayor or one of his representatives will also join us. This will be our third meeting, and the purpose of this meeting is for us to share our support for RPS, as the education of our children is our #1 priority. With that being said, while it may seem like we have a lot of time scheduled for the meeting, it's not. It really is not. So, RPS will share information on their budget, administration will share information on the mayor's proposed budget, and we will get an opportunity to share our thoughts on how we plan to approach our budget review. So far, no formal agenda beyond these items have been created. If you have an item that you believe is critical to discuss, and one that can't wait until our March 21st budget session with RPS, please forward those to our Chief of Staff by Tuesday. Hopefully, that will be sufficient time prior to that meeting for RPS and administration to prepare the requested information. As I mentioned, RPS will present their budget to council on Monday, March 21st at noon. During that time, you will have ample opportunity to hear from RPS and have your questions answered. Thank you so much, and this meeting stands adjourned.